All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience as I dealt with a little bit of technical difficulties as we got started here, and we're picking up with the end of section 6.1. So specifically about double counting and why we need to be aware of double counting and why really double counting is one of the biggest drawbacks in calculating output GDP. And so to really get a handle on what double counting is, we have to define what final goods and services are compared to intermediate goods and services. So final goods and services is output used directly for consumption. Investment, government, and trade purposes. So final goods and services are goods and services at the furthest stage of production. That will make sense a little bit once we define what intermediate goods and services are. Intermediate goods and services are defined to be output that's provided to other businesses. At an intermediate stage of production. So this is not the final users. We always exclude these from our GDP calculations. Why do we want to exclude these from our GDP calculations? Well, if we don't exclude them and if we include them, we end up with something called double counting. So this is the flaw in GDP aggregation, where output is counted more than once as it travels through the stages of production. So remember, our GDP is the dollar value of all final goods and services. So final goods and services, the orange, having nothing to do with intermediate goods and services, the blue. Questions on double counting? All right, let's quickly talk about some other ways to measure economic activity. So the first one that we will discuss today is called our gross national product. Also known as, the acronym for this is GNP. So gross national product is similar to gross domestic product, except gross national product includes both what is produced domestically, as well as what is produced, and this is where it gets a little confusing, by domestic labor and businesses abroad in a year. So this domestic labor, right? This means that if we're talking about United States gross national product, this would be all U.S. owned businesses, even if they are producing in a factory in Japan. So if it's a U.S. owned business, it's part of gross national product. What that means also is that, let's say a Toyota factory in Georgia is not counted towards the United States' gross national product because that Toyota factory is owned by a Japanese company, right? So gross domestic product has to do with where things are. So if it's within our borders, whereas gross national product has to do with who owns the thing. So they're telling us different things, but they're kind of cousins of each other, if you will. Now we can winnow our gross national product down by subtracting the value of our depreciation, which we will define in a second here. But when we subtract our depreciation, so GNP minus depreciation is defined as our net national product. Or abbreviated as NNP. And depreciation, what is that thing? This is the process by which capital ages over time and therefore loses its value. We all know this with cars, right? As soon as you drive a new car off the lot, it loses a bunch of value, right? They depreciate very quickly. But this also has to do with houses, right? If your house is 100 years old, it's going to be depreciating more quickly than a house. Well, I guess that's not necessarily true, but for the most part, if your house is very, very old, it's going to depreciate more quickly than a relatively new house. But we're talking about we're talking about factories and machinery and so on and so forth mostly here. And then lastly, we can winnow this down one last time to our national income, which includes all the income earned by the different classes or workers or whatever, right? So you got wages, you've got profits, wages for people selling their labor, you got profits for companies, you've got rent for people who are landlords, and you've got profit incomes as well. So again, for the most part, you're just going to see gross domestic product and gross national product, but we do have these other ones that we can kind of drill into, right? The net national product and then the national income. So just be aware of those. Just be aware of those.